Welcome back to The Call. We're watching two separate hearings, one in the House, one in the Senate. One big issue here, of course, the financial crisis. How did it happen? We just heard earlier from Alan Greenspan in his Q&A session with lawmakers, basically telling them that he was shocked by the breakdown in the credit markets, Dylan.
In addition to that, admitting to a flaw in his own system, which he said had served him well for some 40 years. So that, a first for the Fed chairman. That'll be a subject of a great conversation here and elsewhere, I am sure. At the same time, the Treasury Department has been faced with the tremendous task of trying to address this massive debt burden that is on America in some form of an orderly fashion that allows the banks to function and all the rest of it. Are they being transparent enough about both the Treasury Secretary's role in advocating some of the leverage that now he has the job of dealing with the consequences of, and in the actual process of allocating our money, taxpayer money, into the banks, which are run in some cases by individuals who are former associates and friends of the Treasury Secretary? David Sirota, nationally syndicated newspaper columnist, senior fellow at the Campaign for America's Future. Steve Leisman, who has been tremendous on the beat from the get-go on this. And then Bill Siebman, you know who he is. Ran the RTC. So welcome to all three of you. I just want to put a couple of things up here. One, Paulson, again, testifying, and I don't want to uniquely beat up on the Treasury Secretary. He's one of a series of executives that advocated a system of risk-taking that they believed was manageable. He was running Goldman Sachs at the time. Here, again, take a look at the full screen. You can see what I'm talking about. I bring this up not to single him out, other than the fact that he is the one now in charge of the Treasury, whereas others that advocated it are not. This is Hank Paulson going back to 2000. We and other global firms have for many years urged the SEC to reform its net capital rule, which in effect is leverage, to allow more efficient use of capital. Again, using it in a way that allows what they believe to be better distributed and more at work. It didn't get into, however, obviously some of the risks with which we are now dealing. That's kind of the problem here. Anyway, he went on there to say the reason you have to change the rules because of global competition, etc. Moving to the present tense, more recently, $250 billion of U.S. taxpayer money injected into the banking system in a closed-door meeting with the other bank CEOs. No, there were not members of the board of directors there. There's not a transcript of that meeting. Steve Leisman did have sources in the room, which we are grateful for. I just wonder from a taxpayer standpoint whether we could have done more. And then the disclosure documents as to how the fees are getting paid out, Bill Siebman, are now blacked out. So again, and I think we have full screens of this, U.S. taxpayer money being paid to the likes of Bank of New York and lawyers here in New York, Simpson Thacher. These documents, which again talk about how the Treasury will process things and give you lots and lots of detail, except for the key part which talks about how much the Treasury is paying the lawyers and bankers to do this, Bill Siebman.
Well, I can tell you that they're going to lose the confidence of the American people and the Congress. When we ran the RTC, all of those things were public. They were public immediately. Sometimes we got hit with criticism, but we didn't hide anything from the public. And I think that if they don't start adopting the same philosophy, they're going to lose all credibility. And their credibility is all they got because they got to get taxpayer money to do the job they want to do. I think they're off in the wrong track.
Yeah, Steve Leisman, I know you've talked to Treasury. How do they respond to some of these questions?
Yeah, we called them up specifically on this issue when we saw the article on the web. Let me give you the first comment on the Bank of New York contract, where they said, this is the comment to CNBC on the criticism, the bony costs are not being disclosed on a temporary basis while we negotiate asset management contracts. We will disclose it, and we said that all along. It wasn't hard to get that comment, by the way.
And what about the Simpson-Thatcher comment?
On the Simpson-Thatcher, the fee structure for Simpson-Thatcher-Bartlett contract is redacted because that is proprietary. But you can see on that same page that the overall cost will not exceed $300,000. So
and then last
what you're missing is the hourly rate and whether or not that ought to be disclosed. And I think that Bill Siebman would agree that if you got another contract you have to do, you don't want to put the taxpayers in a position to pay more, and that if you have to keep something private for a week or two while you negotiate another contract, well, that makes sense. It
does. One last comment from you, Steve, and then I'll go back to Bill. What do they say about the lack of disclosure or transcript from the actual meeting in the Treasury when they allocated the first $250 billion?
I didn't ask about that, Dylan, but I owe you a comment on that, and I'll get it for you.
All right. I appreciate that. Bill, your thoughts first on the comments of the first two.
Well, I think the important thing is that when you're in the government, you're different than when you are in the private sector. And you cannot carry on business the same way as you do in the private sector. I think that's one of the things that is really getting this Treasury off to the bad start here. And so they've got to, sure, they may lose some bargaining power, but they're the big gorilla. I'm not too worried about their bargaining power.
David Sirota, what do you think?
Well, I think releasing documents that have redacted sections on them, big blacked out sections, does not build confidence. The public's going to see that. It certainly is not going to build confidence in Congress. I think it was Jay Rockefeller who made a comment in his local hometown paper saying that these documents look like redacted CIA classified material. And that just is not going to build the kind of confidence that taxpayers are not getting ripped off.
Steve, when you talk to Treasury, and their explanations are clearly rational and makes sense. Their argument is not without foundation, obviously. But do they understand the distinction that Bill Siebman is making, which is this is not a private business, that this is not a normal situation, that this is a national crisis, that this is $1 trillion of taxpayer money, and that you now have taken sole control of a large piece of that and are obliged to inspire not just a solution, but confidence by virtue of transparency as we try to move toward that solution? How do they deal with that?
I think what Treasury would say is something that I think Bill Siebman would appreciate, which is, hey, we're just getting this off the ground. We have promised to be transparent and to disclose this stuff. We put out 2 contracts that were redacted. I don't know that there aren't others, but as far as I know, there's 2. We have specific reasons for redacting them.
But there's more than those contracts, Steve, and you know it.
No, hold on.
It's indicative.
Hold on, Dylan. No, I don't know that there's others.
Well, we know that there was a meeting with $250 billion, and we don't have a transcript. That's a real thing.
But you're the only one, Dylan, who's we feel like a lot of people feel like they have enough that's gone on with that, and that a lot of the banks in there have talked. But let's move on. The key thing that you want, Dylan,
that's not true, though. That's not true. Not a lot of people feel like they know what's gone on in this. That's the whole point of it.
Exactly, Steve.
I mean, you've got
hold on, Steve. Go ahead, David.
What is it you want to know about that meeting?
You've got firms with these contracts. The contracts with these firms. Let's just talk about that.
There are no contracts
yet. Have conflicts of interest. Have potential conflicts of interest. They've been involved in some of these investigations. The contracts with PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young. PricewaterhouseCoopers and Ernst & Young have been involved with AIG. They were involved with Lehman Brothers. And the fact that you have contracts coming out under the headline of a government seal of approval with redacted sections about who's getting paid what, that is not going to build confidence in a public where polls show that the public opposes this bailout and thinks people are getting ripped off.
Bill, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that I appreciate the problems they have getting started. But you can start with the right way and say, I know it may hurt, but everything I do, the public is going to know about. If you go back and look at what we did at the RTC, I'm proud to say we made everything public. On all the kinds of issues you're talking about.
Bill, there were things that you guys messed up. I was a reporter covering you guys back 20 years ago. There were things you didn't disclose at the outset that you eventually ended up disclosing. And let me just be clear here. The main thing that Dylan has been worried about and concerned about, and I think rightly so, is pricing. And that's what they're going to tell us. They promised us 48-hour disclosure on the banks, and they promised us very quick disclosure when they buy assets.
But there's an umbrella point here, Steve, which is that
what you're missing. It's 2 days old, this thing.
The government works for us. They are using our money.
Dylan, I'm more in favor. I've done FOIAs my entire career, Freedom of Information Act's career. There's a time for FOIA. The darn thing is 3 days old.
But what I'm saying to you, Steve, is, and I understand, I don't understand ultimately why you want to defend the Treasury on this when it's taxpayer money. I got bills. I got a stack of people.
There's a time
it's
to
your
criticize
money.
them, Dylan. There's a time to criticize them.
That's right.
They really haven't spent any, and it's not yet.
If this is a psychological issue,
give them a shot.
If this is a psychological issue, it's about building confidence. It's about building confidence. If this is a psychological issue, issuing contracts with redacted sections, I don't care if it's the first day or 3 months out, that's not building confidence.
Yeah, I got to wrap this up.
Now, you got to announce your policy up front.
They did.
We're going to have no secret. They didn't. Why did they pick out certain banks and give them a certain amount of money? Which other banks, under what standards, are they going to put out the rest of the money.
There's a standards document now. There's a standards document.
All right, listen, we'll do more on this in the last call. This is a heated conversation for a reason. Steve, I thank you for your contributions. I know we appreciate your skepticism, but
I'm happy to criticize Treasury, and I will when the time is right.
Okay, well, again, we may have a difference of opinion as to when the right time is.
Okay.
I would say that as they take our money and allocate it, we ought to be privy to how they are doing that. You obviously disagree with that.
I don't.
I would just like to know why and how they're making the decisions in public. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. We'll take a break.